Hi there. My name is Mike O'Mara, and welcome to another episode of Community Conversations, where we take this opportunity to talk to some of the movers and shakers in the community, learn about what's going on in the city of Concord and its surrounding towns. And today we've got a very important discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about mental health and our law enforcement community and how we're approaching some of the problems of mental health here in the city of Concord. So it really is my honor today to have a couple great guests with us. I've got Chief Bradley Osgood of the Concord Police Department. Thank you for being here, Chief.
Thank you for inviting us.
And from Riverbend Community Mental Health, I've got Lisa Madden, who is the President and CEO. Did I get that right?
I sure did. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Excellent, thanks. And so Riverbend Health, for those who might not be familiar with it, what is Riverbend?
So Riverbend is the community mental health center that serves the greater Greater Concord area. We are one of 10 mental health centers in the state, and our job is to be able to provide supports and services for people living with mental illness. Maybe it is severe, maybe it is early onset, or even during this pandemic and what we've dealt with is some people who have had mental health struggles that they've never experienced before. And we want to be able to be there to provide them the appropriate treatment and supports to be able to get in recovery and stay there.
Excellent. That's a great resource to have in the city of Concord. And, you know, oftentimes we've seen a lot in the news lately about the interface between law enforcement and those suffering some mental health crises, and you know that has certainly been the case in Concord, that with the pandemic and with certain things going on, that we see more folks with suffering from mental health crises right now. So I understand really the Concord Police Department and Riverbend have started working together. And so Chief, you know, how long has the two entities been working together here in Concord?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been in the city of Concord as a police officer since 1989. And as a young patrolman in the early 1990s, I interacted with Riverbend clinicians at the Concord Hospital or at the Pillar House at the corner of State and Pleasant Street frequently. So there was always this partnership between the police and Riverbend. But since I took over as the chief in 2013, I began having quarterly meetings at an executive level with the president and CEO of Riverbend. Formerly it was Peter Evers. We would meet on a regular basis, and I meet with Lisa on a regular basis as well, just to discuss this collaboration that we have. There's a lot of different moving parts in Riverbend,
right?
And it's really good to have liaisons, you know, at the ground level that are communicating, and it's also important to have the executives working in partnership as well.
Right. Absolutely. You know, you need your leadership and the boots on the ground really kind of working together on these things. And speaking with that, you know, let's talk a little bit about the work that you do together, and we'll start with the boots on the ground. What sort of training is involved for the police officers that start engaging with Riverbend and with folks that are suffering from some sort of mental health crisis?
So it all begins at the police academy level, and at the police academy, the police officers are trained in how to recognize mental illness and how to you know, de-escalate situations. I think Riverbend, you know, they're an important partner with us because there's that ongoing training that we can tap into their expertise. We've recently had trainings with the forensic psychologist at the state hospital to recognize different mental health issues and signs and symptoms, if you will. Because right now we're seeing a lot of methamphetamine use, which is a drug issue. However, people that are under the influence of methamphetamine sometimes present as having or suffering from a mental illness. So there's an ongoing training, and certainly from an executive level, Lisa and I have discussed different training topics that we can incorporate into our schedule.
And Lisa, does it kind of go the other way around too, that folks at Riverbend know how to interact with the police officers?
Absolutely. We feel very privileged to have the relationship we have with the police department because there is a mutual understanding of the goal. The goal is to be able to address whatever's happening without anyone getting hurt, and in a way that will get them the care they need if it's mental illness, or in the correction system if that's what's appropriate. But what we've learned is that our ability to work together means that we can reduce the level of hostility that they may encounter, the need to use force in situations, and we can be able to look at a person's presenting problem and see how much of it is related to mental illness or substance use disorder. That changes the direction of treatment and what we're able to do. And doing it as a team, we've learned a great deal from our colleagues at the police department, and it's clear they've learned a great deal from us because they ask a lot of great questions, and they're easily engaged in training opportunities. So we're really very grateful.
That's fantastic. So looking at this from the perspective of somebody that's boot on the ground, somebody that's dealing with an incident, how would an incident be handled? And does it kind of differ depending, whether it's somebody out in the community or somebody that's already at Riverbend? So I guess I'll start with you, Chief. Like, how would an incident be handled when it's obvious there's some sort of mental health component to it?
So first of all, no two incidents are exactly the
That's
same.
right.
I figured that.
And as an example, I'll give you an example of the mobile crisis unit that Lisa's team has in our patrol officers. So we may get to a call where somebody's experiencing a mental health episode, and we'll call Lisa's mobile crisis unit, and they'll either talk to the person over the phone, or they'll make an appointment to come out, or they'll just come right out to the house or the residence and be able to de-escalate and work from there. So that when they arrive on scene, the police kind of step off into the shadows, right? And so they're the experts, they're trained, they have the education and the experience to deal with or manage those clients. So that's, it could be that they get called first and they ask us to go with them. It just depends.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's a really important point that the chief makes, is that when we come on scene, or if we are invited to come out, they do try to take a step back so that they can de-escalate the situation just from that presence alone and try to understand what is happening from a psychiatric perspective. There are times when we might go out from mobile crisis where they call our emergency line and we decide it's time we need to go out and help them on site, and we've realized that there's some risks levels there that we can't manage alone, and we would call them to join us and support us in that process. But again, the intent is really all about de-escalation, identifying what level of care do these folks need. And a lot of the time we can resolve the situation in the community, and they don't need to go into a hospital setting, or they don't need to go to the emergency department, which is, of course, is a big goal, is to not have everybody come into the emergency department.
Excellent. And for those who might not be familiar, what is the mobile crisis unit, and how long has that been a part of Riverbend?
So we've had a mobile crisis response team in Concord for several years. We were one of the first ones to be able to start it. And what the plan is for that is that if people call in crisis of any kind, and there's the question of whether or not they might need to go to an emergency department for evaluation or into a higher level of care, what we first want to do is see if we can address it in their home or address it wherever they are, and find a way to be able to get them the services that will keep them in the community and not need to go into a hospital or the emergency department where they may be staying for a long period of time. So there's a high percentage of these cases and the folks that are in distress that we can help them find a reasonable solution at the time that they call, and we can avoid a higher level. The times that we can't is when we do have partnership with Concord Hospital, and our teams are able to refer there, and we already have some of the preliminary evaluation done, and the team at the hospital will pick up. The opposite also happens. We have people that might come into the emergency department because they think that's the only place they can go. They can see that the level of care that they need is not an ED level of care, but they need something to deal with the immediate crisis. So we do have our mobile team that will work with them, and we can have them back in the community. And right now we have this program called the Behavioral Health Crisis Treatment Center. And some of these folks have been able to go directly there, which has a peer support room and has some other support services. And they are able to kind of problem solve, put together a treatment plan, make sure that they're able to put together a safety plan, and have people still remain in the community. There are some changes coming in the community with what the department is doing for mobile crisis, and I'm sure we'll speak about that momentarily, but we expect that we'll be able to continue to provide good continuum of care.
That's fantastic. And I imagine that need to keep people out of the emergency room when it is possible has just grown since the pandemic has started.
It's very significant. I mean, there's, we all know about times in which there's been upwards of 80 or 90 people throughout the state waiting for a higher level of care. For adults now, it tends to be in the area of probably about 15, 20, but not, and some days it's down to about 5 or 6 that are waiting to get in. But the issue is having access to that level of service, and DHHS and the state is doing everything they can to expand access to supported housing, other options for residential treatment, so that people that need that type of care can have it for the long term, so that they can leave New Hampshire Hospital, so people who are in acute crisis can get into New Hampshire Hospital. So it's really a whole system change that's in process right now in order to be able to meet the need of the community.
That's great. And then, I imagine after, this initial crisis visit with the mobile crisis team, with the initial engagement with law enforcement, that there's got to be some kind of follow-up following us. So I guess I'll start with you, Lisa, and then
Right.
please feel free to add on, Chief Osgood. But what does follow-up look like after
Well,
an
I
incident?
think, like the chief had mentioned, there's ongoing meetings that happen that are just scheduled, predictable meetings. Not only do he and I meet every quarter or more frequently, and we talk about what we need to on a high level to make sure that we are providing the resources the community needs. But our folks that are the clinicians and the patrol officers and the leadership on that level, they meet regularly as well and say, what went well in this situation? What didn't? What could we do differently? And what do we learn from it? And over the past several years, I think a lot of great conversations come out of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have an expectation that if we call the mobile crisis unit, that this is the level of service that we're going to get. And if that doesn't happen, then we, bring it back to the leadership so that we can discuss this and find out why this was the way it was. And it could be that it was just a policy decision or what have you. But I truly believe that the success of the mobile crisis team not only is the hard work on the clinicians, but it's that collaborative, constantly talking either on a monthly basis and really coming to a resolution on any issues that arise.
Yeah, what's been really, I think, helpful for both sides of the conversation is that we can meet on any case at any time. If something happened and we need to problem solve it, we can just get together because the relationships are that strong, that we know who to contact, they know who to contact, and we just get together and say, okay, what do we need to do? But there's a tremendous amount of respect between the two professions as well. We've learned a lot as clinicians about the challenges and the struggles and the stressors that you'll see the police department will encounter. And in turn, I think that they've learned a lot about our efforts to support them by de-escalating and not having people get so agitated that some type of force is needed.
Right, and that is critical in
Yeah.
this day and age, definitely. So, I think you've already kind of touched on it, but I'll start with you, Chief Osgood. How has this partnership changed or grown over the years? Obviously, it seems like it's become more important, more critical to the day-to-day, but, maybe there's some specifics or even just an example of how an incident was handled when this first started to what's happening now.
Yeah, so as I was growing up as a police officer, I knew Riverbend as a Riverbend Community Mental Health. And as I began getting into leadership positions with the police department, the chief that I took over from, John Duval, he actually served on the board of directors at Riverbend. And when I took over, I was fortunate to also be selected to serve on the board of directors of Riverbend. And in that capacity as on the board, you really learn all about Riverbend, and the services are very, very in-depth in this community. And not a lot of people, line officers would fully understand the breadth of what services that they have. I've partnered, was fortunate to be part of their strategic planning because as an organization, as a police department, we have goals. Every year we come up with goals, and every year, especially for the past 10 years, our goals include homelessness, they include substance use disorder, and they include people suffering from mental health. And if Riverbend's not around, if Riverbend's not successful in their mission, then it's going to make our jobs all the much more difficult. And so I think it's really important that, for the past, say, close to a decade, police and fire has been on the board.
Absolutely.
And we're able to bring that experience back to our leadership team, and that filters down to the line officers.
Yeah, that's a critical link. I mean, we're fortunate to have a very energized board that is very interested in making sure that we are a collaborator in the community, that no one does this on their own. So we have the police department, we have fire department represented, we have other key stakeholders in the community, and they hold us to task in the right way. You're saying make sure we provide the community support that we need. And it's nice to hear that there's an appreciation for the depth of the services that we provide, because there's all kinds of different mental health needs, and we have programs specifically for substance use disorders. We also support the Doorway, which is another big thing that the chief and his team would be interacting with, and that's people dealing with acute substance use disorder needs, and they can stop in and get treatment, and we can start the process of their recovery as well. And those are the folks that you may see finding themselves in a lot of legal trouble. So our ability to work collaboratively in that regard as well keeps people safe and hopefully gets people treatment.
And that's great. And it really sounds like there's a lot of benefits to the community as a whole through the partnership. But certainly, as we've all had some challenges during the pandemic, and challenges, certainly with things that have gone on nationwide, whether in talks about law enforcement and about mental health and how we deal with mental health. What are some of the challenges that both of you see your organizations and your partnership facing? So I guess I'd start with you, Lisa.
So I think that, the pandemic has just been a nightmare for everyone, and aside from the tragedy of the loss of life, it's also been so disruptive to everyone's world. So when you don't have your typical means of being able to have stress release or be able to enjoy some time, people's stress levels, their anxiety levels, and quite honestly, their anger level is pretty high. So that's, I think, we've seen some more incidents of people having outbursts that it's just exacerbated over the pandemic. But I think one of the challenges that we are going to face in the very near future is the change to the mobile crisis structure within the state. So, and it's an opportunity as much as it may be a challenge. So it's the state is investing in trying to transform the way in which emergency services are managed. So instead of it looking like you have to go to an emergency department to get access to an emergency level or high level of care, mobile crisis services will be available throughout the state. Currently, there are 3 regions that have it, with Concord being one. Soon, all 10 regions will have mobile crisis. That will help people be able to receive services in the community. And in fact, the chief and I were talking about how we might be able to use our relationship to educate other community police departments and other places about how to work this together.
That's
how to be able to do that, because we've had a great experience. So we have to adjust to that new model, and the other impact that's going to have is as the entire nation goes to having 988 as the emergency access for psychiatric needs, it shifts how we get in contact with each other. So we were talking the other day about making sure that our link for communicating does not get so disrupted that we can't get immediate access to each other when we need to. So we have some of those things to sort out as this program evolves over the next year.
Excellent. Chief, some additional challenges you see?
Well, I think even, the whole COVID has really put everybody on edge. But even before COVID, you were hearing reports of people in emergency rooms that were waiting for placement or a bed. They're in the hallways for days on end.
Yes.
And that it shouldn't be happening, right?
Right.
And I know the governor stepped in when he found out about that, and he had some pretty harsh statements on that. But it's the capacity. Do we as a state have capacity to treat our communities? And funding. It all comes down to funding.
Yes.
Are we funding the community mental health services appropriately. And so those are big challenges, especially coming out of a COVID pandemic and the way the economy is kind of fragile.
That's true. So, there are the challenges, but what do you see some of the biggest recent successes or successes that you think are really coming forward in that partnership?
So I wouldn't hesitate to say that, the communication and the relationship building that we've had with the police department over the past many years has allowed us to do the work that we're doing now and to take chances on doing some new things. And I think the doorway for us was one, the crisis treatment center was certainly one, knowing we had their support. But I think that anything that we can do to continue to work collaboratively ultimately will positively impact our community and the person being served. Because again, as I said in the beginning, as much as we can do to de-escalate and reduce the need for a higher level of intervention, the safer the community is and the less stressful we all are. So I still see there being lots of opportunity for us to work very successfully together. Same with our first responders who are, the ambulance folks and fire department. It's been really a pleasure to be able to work with them and have their willingness to learn about mental illness and addiction and to not engage in judgment about these individuals, but to treat them with respect and dignity and to honor the disease that they are living with.
That's amazing. And Chief?
I'll give you two quick examples of how this partnership has produced some sort of a success. But for our involvement with Riverbend and getting to know individuals at a higher leadership level at Riverbend, we were able to get them to help us craft a policy, for our police officers on how to manage people suffering from a mental health crisis. And so they're the experts. And Sarah Gagnon graciously sat down on her weekend at home and helped us coordinate and write this policy. The second example that I'll give you, and this was brought up by several officers that were involved in the situation, but they had arrested an individual that it was a serious crime. It was a life-altering crime. This person was going to be probably, sentenced to jail or prison for a long time. And when they had him at the Concord police station, he began suffering, certainly a lot of stress and anger. Right. And they were really concerned about his well-being and whether or not he was going to do self-harm. And they called the mobile crisis team, which didn't, we think of it as for the external out into the community. But they called the mobile crisis team to the Concord police station and let them manage that situation. And it was a win-win for everybody involved.
That's amazing.
Great.
Right.
That is amazing that the partnership has developed in such a way that on what might be considered home turf of the police, that you brought in the professionals. That's amazing.
Well, mobile is really mobile.
Yeah.
Wherever the incident is or wherever we need to go, we are able to do that with the team that we've developed.
That's awesome. That really is. So, if I'm somebody that either wants to learn more about this partnership or what Riverbend does or what the police department is doing, and if I want to help, is there any place I can go to either learn more or offer help in these?
Well, I would certainly invite people to go to our website, which is riverbendcmhc.org. And everything that we provide for services is identified there, and how to access the different levels of emergency care, including mobile crisis, is on the website. So I think they'll find a lot of information there.
And we have community residents that call us frequently. They're looking for where do I get services for this? Where do I get services for this? And we have all that at our disposal, and a lot of it is with Riverbend.
That's fantastic. And I suppose we should, if either I am or somebody I know is in some sort of mental health crisis, what should I do?
By all means, call for help. I mean, it's not something that we want somebody to try to resolve on their own. There are experts out there that can help you. And there's different numbers you can call. You can call the emergency number for our organization at Riverbend. Certainly, you can call the police department. 211 will get you connected with people. But reach out, because there's the ability to be able to offer support. And part of what we bring to the table is the ability to be able to assess the level of care that someone might need. So we're there. Treatment does work. We're ready to help. Please reach out.
Excellent. Anything to add, Chief Hoskins?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for coming in today for this very important conversation. I've learned a lot about the partnership between your two organizations and really some very forward-thinking work that is being done here in Concord as to how to deal with mental health and addiction and people basically suffering from the different diseases of mental health.
That's
and
right.
It's kind of heartening to learn that these efforts are being made. So thank you both, sincerely, both for the work you do and for taking a moment out of your busy schedules to talk to us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting us come in.
Of course, anytime. Doors open here. So, all right, with that, we thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Community Conversations, and we look forward to seeing you next time.